The forest only goes silent when something dangerous is watching. Ethan Cole muttered the words under his breath as the wind carried cold rain through the black pines of Velker 9. The storm had rolled in fast after sunset, turning the alien wilderness into a maze of silver fog and dripping shadows. His boots sank into 6 inches of glowing moss, while the motion tracker strapped to his wrist crackled with interference. Somewhere deeper in the trees, something massive moved. Not an animal. Too quiet for that. Ethan adjusted the old pulse rifle hanging against his shoulder and scanned the darkness again. The outpost miners had reported missing supply drones all week, but drones didn't leave claw marks 10 feet high on steel cargo containers. He crouched beside another ruined machine, half buried in wet ferns. The metal frame looked peeled apart, like cheap plastic. Rainwater hissed against exposed circuitry. Fresh tracks circled the wreckage. Long, narrow, almost human. Then the forest went still. No wind. No insects. No distant calls from the night creatures. Just silence. Ethan slowly looked up toward the trees. 2 golden eyes stared down at him from nearly 20 feet above the ground. His pulse jumped instantly. The figure crouched on a thick branch like some predatory spirit wrapped in darkness. He caught flashes of deep blue skin beneath torn black armor. White markings glowed faintly along her arms like cracks filled with moonlight. Not an animal. A woman. Or close enough. Before he could speak, a sharp crack echoed through the forest. Plasma fire. The branch exploded beside her in a shower of sparks and burning bark. The woman dropped hard through the trees, hitting the ground less than 15 feet away. Ethan raised his rifle automatically, but froze when he saw the collar around her throat. Thick metal. Hunter tech. Steam rose from its glowing edges where it burned against her skin. Another plasma shot tore through the rain behind them. Voices followed, distorted through helmets. Target located. The woman tried to stand, but stumbled immediately. Blood the color of liquid sapphire streaked down one leg. Her golden eyes snapped toward Ethan with pure warning. Do not touch me, human. Her voice was low and rough, like she hadn't spoken in days. Ethan glanced toward the approaching lights moving through the trees. At least 6 hunters. Maybe more. Yeah, he said quietly while checking the rifle charge. Not really a great time for introductions. The woman's pupils narrowed when he stepped closer. Every muscle in her body tensed like she was seconds away from attacking him despite the injury. Strange. Terrified people usually begged for help. She looked offended by the idea of needing it. Another blast hit a tree nearby, showering both of them with glowing splinters. Ethan made the decision instantly. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the ravine behind the rocks. The second his skin touched hers, the woman inhaled sharply. Not fear. Shock. Real shock. Her glowing markings suddenly brightened beneath the rain. Ethan barely noticed as he dragged her through the fog and down into the narrow canyon below. Behind them, the hunters spread through the forest with mechanical precision. Search beams sliced through the darkness overhead while thunder rolled across the mountains. Ethan pushed open the rusted hatch hidden beneath the cliffside and shoved the woman inside the abandoned survey bunker just as another pulse shot lit up the rain outside. The heavy door slammed shut behind them with a metallic groan. Silence returned again, but this time it felt different. The woman stared at him from across the dim bunker, breathing unevenly. Then her hand slowly rose toward the place where he had touched her skin. Her expression changed completely. Fear. Confusion. Something deeper. No, she whispered softly. This cannot happen. Ethan frowned. What are you talking about? The alien woman looked directly into his eyes for the first time since they met. You touched the bond. The bunker smelled like wet metal, burned wiring, and old dust trapped beneath decades of silence. A single emergency strip flickered red across the ceiling, throwing broken shadows over the concrete walls while rain hammered against the sealed hatch outside. Ethan kept his rifle lowered, but ready as he studied the alien woman standing. Across from him, up close, she looked even less human than he first thought. She was nearly 7 feet tall, her shoulders narrow but powerful beneath the damaged black armor clinging to her skin. Thin silver patterns pulsed faintly along her throat and arms like living circuitry beneath deep blue flesh. And her eyes never blinked. They stayed fixed on him with terrifying focus. All right, Ethan said carefully. Start with the part where hunters are trying to drag you through the woods with a shock collar. The woman ignored the question completely. Her breathing remained uneven as she stared at her own hand where his skin had touched hers minutes earlier. The glowing patterns there continued, pulsing brighter every few seconds. This should not be possible, she whispered. Not with a human. Ethan slowly removed his wet jacket and tossed it onto a rusted chair beside the wall heater. People usually say thank you first. Her gaze snapped toward him instantly. Sharp. Defensive. You think this is a blessing? She asked. You have no understanding of what you touched. Ethan walked toward an old supply cabinet built into the bunker wall and forced it open with a metallic groan. Empty ration containers spilled onto the floor beside a dusty med kit. Then explain it to me. The alien woman hesitated for the first time since entering the bunker. Outside, thunder rolled through the mountains hard enough to vibrate the walls. Searchlights swept across the narrow bunker windows above them before disappearing deeper into the storm. The hunters were still close. She finally stepped backward until her shoulders touched the far wall. Like distance alone might weaken whatever terrified her. My species forms neural bonds during physical imprinting, she said quietly. Usually through ritual, genetics, chemical compatibility. Ethan pulled a portable scanner from the med kit and checked the readings on her injury. Elevated pulse, severe exhaustion, body temperature climbing rapidly. Okay, he said. Sounds complicated. It is sacred. Her voice hardened instantly. And permanent. Ethan looked up from the scanner. You are telling me touching your wrist started some kind of alien marriage. For the first time, emotion cracked through her cold expression. Not anger. Embarrassment. It is not marriage. Ethan raised an eyebrow. That bad, huh? She almost answered before stopping herself. Instead, she looked away toward the hatch as another beam of light swept outside. The hunters will not stop now, she murmured. They know the bond activated. Ethan frowned. How? The woman slowly touched the metal collar around her throat. Tiny blue symbols blinked across its surface like a heartbeat monitor. Because they were waiting for it. Silence filled the bunker again. Ethan stared at the collar for several seconds before realization settled into his chest like cold lead. You were bait. No. Her golden eyes lifted toward his again. Sad this time. Tired. I was property. Something about the way she said it made Ethan stop moving completely. No anger. No drama. Just exhaustion from repeating the truth too many times. He crouched beside the portable heater and adjusted the failing power cell until warm air hissed softly into the bunker. The woman watched him carefully. Why are you helping me? She asked after a moment. Ethan shrugged without looking at her. Because somebody should. Her glowing markings pulsed again. Brighter now. And for the first time since they met, the alien woman looked genuinely afraid of him. The heater rattled weakly beside the wall, pushing uneven warmth through the bunker while rainwater dripped from Ethan's jacket onto the concrete floor in slow, steady taps. Outside, the storm had swallowed the forest completely. Thunder rolled across Velker, 9 like distant machinery, and every few minutes a white search beam cut through the narrow bunker windows before fading back into darkness. Ethan sat on an overturned storage crate, cleaning moisture from his rifle, while pretending not to notice the alien woman watching him from across the room. She had not stopped watching him for nearly 10 minutes. Not once. You are unusually calm, she finally said. Ethan slid the rifle power cell back into place with a soft click. You have not met many miners. You are not a miner. Her answer came instantly. Ethan smirked faintly. And you are not property. The words hung between them longer than he expected. The woman looked away first. She slowly lowered herself against the wall near the heater. Though even exhausted, she carried herself with strange, controlled grace. Every movement felt deliberate, measured, dangerous. Her glowing markings had dimmed slightly now, fading beneath the soft red emergency light overhead. Ethan noticed one long tear across the black armor near her shoulder where the material had fused against burned skin beneath it. You should let me see the injury, he said quietly. No, you are bleeding through the suit. I said no. Ethan leaned back against the crate with a tired sigh. You always this friendly? Her eyes narrowed at him again. You touched a silvery imprint bond and survived. I am still deciding whether that makes you brave or deeply foolish. Ethan shrugged. Usually both. Silence returned for a while after that. Not hostile this time. Just strange. The bunker lights flickered once before stabilizing again. Somewhere deeper inside the abandoned structure, old ventilation fans groaned awake for a few seconds and then died again. Ethan glanced toward the hatch. How long before your hunters stop searching? They are not my hunters. Her voice turned colder immediately. They belong to the Dominion. Ethan studied her expression carefully. That sounds important. She did not answer right away. Instead, her gaze drifted toward the rain streaking across the small bunker window. The Silthery Dominion controls 14 inhabited systems, she said at last. Most species call us conquerors. And what do you call yourselves? Her golden eyes reflected the dim red light. Survivors. Ethan could not tell if she believed it. Before he could ask another question, the woman suddenly stiffened. Her head tilted slightly toward the ceiling. Listening. Ethan heard it a second later. Heavy footsteps above the bunker. Slow. Mechanical. Search teams. The woman stood instantly despite the pain in her leg. Every trace of exhaustion vanished behind pure instinct. They found us. Ethan killed the heater immediately. The bunker dropped into near darkness except for the faint emergency strip glowing overhead. Another sound followed. Metal scraping across stone directly above them. Ethan moved toward the wall monitor connected to the old surface cameras. Static filled most of the screen, but one image still worked. 3 armored figures moved through the rain outside, carrying pulse lanterns. Tall, heavily equipped. One of them stopped directly above the hidden hatch. Ethan quietly reached for the rifle beside the crate. The alien woman grabbed his wrist before he could lift it. Her hand felt colder than before. If they enter, she whispered, do not let them take me alive. Ethan stared at her for a moment. The fear in her eyes looked different now. Not fear of pain, fear of returning. Then one of the hunters outside spoke through an amplified helmet speaker. Princess Lasara. The distorted voice echoed through the storm above them. You cannot hide from your bloodline forever. Ethan slowly looked back at the woman beside him. And for the first time since meeting her, he realized the forest had not been hunting a prisoner. It had been hunting royalty. The distorted voice outside faded back into static, but the silence that followed felt worse somehow. Ethan remained crouched beside the wall monitor with the rifle resting across his knees while rain slammed against the bunker hatch hard enough to shake dust loose from the ceiling. Across the room, Lasara stood perfectly still beneath the flickering emergency light. Princess. The word did not fit the woman he found bleeding through the forest. She looked exhausted, cornered, dangerous in the way wounded animals usually were. Not royal. Ethan glanced back toward the grainy monitor feed. The armored hunters were spreading out across the rocks above the bunker with slow, careful movements. They were not searching blindly anymore. They knew exactly where she was. You want to explain that part? He asked quietly. Lasara said nothing at first. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor as though she hated the answer before speaking it aloud. The Dominion does not allow heirs to disappear. Ethan leaned back slightly against the wall. So you ran. I escaped. Her correction came instantly, sharp enough to cut through the bunker air. Ethan studied her carefully in the dim light. The glowing silver patterns beneath her skin had started pulsing again. Faster now. Not random. Rhythmic. Almost like a second heartbeat beneath the surface. What were they planning to do with you? He asked. Lasara finally looked at him again, and for the first time he saw something beneath all the cold control. Shame. Use me. The bunker lights flickered weakly overhead. Ethan frowned. That collar. She touched the metal restraint around her throat again. It suppresses higher neural functions during imprint season. Ethan blinked once. Imprint season sounds worse every time you explain it. A faint sound escaped her then. Not quite a laugh. More like someone remembering how. Among the Silthery, bonds are political, she said softly. Controlled pairings create alliances. Bloodlines. Power. Ethan glanced toward her glowing markings again. And the hunters were waiting for somebody to trigger yours. Lasara nodded once. The collar broadcasts hormonal synchronization signals across nearby systems. The first compatible imprint would bind permanently. Ethan stared at her for several seconds before realizing what she meant. So they threw you into the woods like bait and waited for somebody to touch you. Not somebody. Her golden eyes lifted slowly toward him. A human. Ethan frowned deeper. Why me? Your species resists neural influence better than most civilized races. Human imprint compatibility is extremely rare. Her voice lowered slightly. which makes it valuable. Outside, thunder cracked across the mountains again. One of the hunters shouted distant commands through static-filled speakers while searchlights swept across the rain. Ethan stood slowly and walked toward the rusted supply shelf near the heater, mostly to give himself a second to think. "So congratulations," he muttered. "I accidentally walked into alien royal politics." Lasara watched him carefully. "You should leave before dawn." Ethan grabbed an old thermal blanket from the shelf and tossed it toward her without looking. She caught it easily despite the injury. "The hunters will kill you if they realize the bond stabilized." "That sounds dramatic." "It is law." Ethan finally looked back at her. "Funny thing about laws," he said quietly. "They usually stop mattering when they stop being decent." Lasara stared at him like she had never heard someone speak that way before. The silence stretched between them again while the bunker heater rattled softly nearby. Then suddenly the lights went out completely. Total darkness swallowed the room except for the faint silver glow beneath Lasara's skin. Ethan reached instinctively for the flashlight clipped to his belt, but before he could switch it on, Lasara grabbed his wrist hard enough to stop him. "Do not move," she whispered. Ethan froze immediately. Above them, directly over the bunker hatch, heavy metal scraped slowly across stone. The darkness inside the bunker felt alive. Ethan could hear the rain outside, the distant groan of trees bending in the storm, the slow metallic scrape directly above them. But louder than all of it was Lasara's breathing beside him. Controlled, careful, afraid. Her hand still gripped his wrist tightly enough that he could feel the slight tremor beneath her calm exterior. Ethan stayed perfectly still. Years ago, before mining contracts and remote worlds, he learned something important during survival training on frontier colonies. Most creatures stop hunting when they think you already know they are there. The dangerous ones get quieter. Another scraping sound rolled across the bunker ceiling. Then silence. Ethan slowly leaned closer toward Lasara until his voice was barely above a whisper. "How many?" Her glowing eyes remained fixed upward toward the hatch. "3 directly above us. More near the ridge." Ethan frowned slightly. "You can hear all that." Silthery hearing adapts during stress responses. Her expression tightened, especially after imprint activation. Ethan almost asked another question before a sharp electronic chirp interrupted them both. The collar around her throat had started blinking faster. Bright blue pulses cut through the darkness every few seconds. Lasara cursed softly in her own language and grabbed the metal. "Restraint immediately." "What does that mean?" Ethan whispered. "The bond is stabilizing." Ethan blinked once. "That sounds bad." "It means they can track us more accurately now." Outside, one of the hunters suddenly spoke again through the storm. "Princess Lasara." The amplified voice echoed across the rocks above them. "Return willingly, and the human will be spared Dominion judgment." Ethan rolled his eyes slightly. That usually means the opposite. Lasara did not react. She kept staring at the blinking collar, while panic slowly crept beneath her calm expression. Ethan noticed something else too. The glowing silver patterns beneath her skin were spreading higher along her neck now. Softer than neon. Almost beautiful in the darkness. "What happens when the bond stabilizes?" he asked quietly. Lasara swallowed once before answering. "The imprint becomes permanent." "Permanent how?" She looked at him then. Really looked at him. Not as a human. Not as a stranger. Something more confusing than either. The silthery nervous system begins emotional synchronization with the bonded partner. Ethan stared for a second. "That sounds unhealthy." A faint smile almost appeared at the corner of her mouth before fading again. "Most of our traditions are." The bunker groaned softly as heavy footsteps crossed above the hatch once more. Dust drifted from the ceiling onto Ethan's jacket. The hunters were searching closer now. Methodical. Patient. Ethan slowly reached toward the flashlight clipped at his belt again, but Lasara tightened her grip instantly. "No light," she whispered. "Their helmets detect thermal fluctuations." Ethan lowered his hand again with a quiet sigh. "You really know how to make a night relaxing." To his surprise, Lasara let out the smallest breath of laughter. Soft. Brief. Human. The sound vanished almost immediately when pain crossed her face again. Ethan noticed her leaning harder against the wall now. Her breathing had grown uneven. "Your fever is getting worse." "It is not fever." "Then what is it?" She hesitated long enough to answer the question without words. Ethan understood anyway. The bond. Whatever alien biology was rewriting itself inside. Her right now, it was hurting. Ethan slowly removed the thermal blanket from his shoulders and handed it toward her in the darkness. Take it. Lasara stared at the blanket, but did not move. You will be cold. I have been cold before. Another long silence passed before she finally accepted it carefully from his hands. The moment her fingers brushed his skin again, the glowing patterns across her throat flared bright silver beneath the darkness. Lasara inhaled sharply and pulled back immediately like the contact burned. Ethan froze too, not because of the glow, because for one strange second, he felt something that was not his own. Fear, loneliness, exhaustion so deep it felt endless. Then it vanished. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. Lasara looked horrified. You felt that? She whispered. It was not a question. The feeling vanished so quickly Ethan almost convinced himself he imagined it. But the echo still lingered faintly behind his ribs. Cold stone floors. Endless exhaustion. The terrible weight of being watched every second of your life. None of it belonged to him. Across the darkness of the bunker, Lasara looked shaken in a way he had not seen before. Not angry. Not defensive. Exposed. Her glowing markings pulsed unevenly beneath the blanket wrapped around her shoulders while rain hammered harder against the mountain outside. Ethan slowly lowered his hand. That was your memory? Lasara swallowed once. An emotional fragment. Her voice sounded smaller now. The bond should not have progressed this quickly. Ethan leaned back carefully against the wall beside the dead heater. You keep saying that. Because it is wrong. The answer came immediately. Too immediately. Ethan studied her glowing eyes in the darkness. You sound more scared of this bond than the hunters. Silence. Then finally, very softly, I am. Outside, another search beam swept across the bunker windows. This time it lingered longer. The hunters were narrowing their perimeter. Ethan could hear faint electronic pulses moving through the rain above them like tracking equipment scanning the rocks. He reached for the rifle beside him again. Lasara noticed instantly. You cannot fight Dominion trackers alone. Good thing I was not planning to ask permission. A strange expression crossed her face then. Confusion mixed with something warmer. Human males are reckless. Ethan shrugged lightly. Only the breathing ones. To his surprise, Lasara looked down for a moment as though hiding another almost smile. The bunker fell quiet again except for the storm. Ethan noticed her posture slowly weakening despite how hard she tried to hide it. She kept pressing one hand against the collar around her throat now, like it hurt more with every passing minute. Let me see the device, he said. No, you are shaking. Silthery physiology reacts aggressively during imprint synchronization. Ethan frowned. That is a very scientific way to say you feel terrible. Her eyes lifted toward him again. Pain is expected. Maybe where you come from. Ethan stood slowly and crossed the bunker before she could object again. Lasara tensed immediately when he knelt beside her, every muscle tightening beneath the blanket. Ethan stopped moving the second he noticed. I am not going to hurt you. The words came out softer than he intended. Lasara stared at him in silence. Then, after a long moment, she slowly lowered her hand from the collar. Ethan carefully examined the restraint beneath the dim silver glow from her skin. The metal looked fused together from several overlapping alloys he did not recognize. Tiny symbols pulsed across its surface alongside biological readings. Heart rate, neural activity, hormonal spikes. Ethan's expression darkened immediately. This thing is monitoring your entire nervous system. It was designed to. That is disturbing. To the Dominion, efficiency matters more than dignity. Ethan glanced up toward her face again. You really hate your people? Lasara looked toward the rain streaking down the bunker window. I hate what survival turned us into. The honesty in her voice caught him off guard. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then Ethan carefully reached toward one damaged section of the collar near the back. This connector looks loose. Lasara grabbed his wrist instantly. The second her skin touched his again, another emotional pulse rushed through him, this time stronger. Bright palace lights reflecting across silver floors. Crowds kneeling. Voices demanding obedience. Loneliness hidden beneath royal posture. Ethan inhaled sharply. Lasara pulled her hand away immediately, horrified. Stop doing that. Ethan muttered under his breath. I am not trying to. Her voice trembled slightly for the first time. The bond amplifies emotional transfer through physical proximity. Ethan rubbed one hand across his face slowly. Alien biology is exhausting. Lysara stared at him for another long second before quietly asking, "Why are you still here?" Ethan frowned. "What kind of question is that? You owe me nothing." Thunder shook the bunker walls hard enough to rattle loose bolts from the ceiling. Ethan looked toward the hatch above them, then back at the exhausted alien princess sitting in the darkness beside him. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but leaving you behind still feels wrong." The glowing patterns beneath Lysara's skin flared softly again. Not from fear this time. The storm finally began to weaken sometime near dawn, but the silence outside the bunker felt wrong. Too still. Too careful. Ethan noticed it immediately. The hunters had stopped moving. No more footsteps above the rocks. No more amplified voices echoing through the forest. Just rain dripping from stone and the low mechanical hum of distant tracking equipment somewhere beyond the ridge. Beside the wall, Lysara looked worse. The silver patterns beneath her skin now stretched across both sides of her neck and down her arms in faint, glowing lines. Beautiful in a way that made Ethan uneasy. Nothing that bright should come from pain. She sat wrapped in the thermal blanket with her eyes half closed, breathing slow and shallow. "You need rest," Ethan said quietly while checking the remaining charge on his rifle battery. "Silthery, do not sleep during synchronization." "That sounds unhealthy too." A weak breath of amusement escaped her. Ethan looked toward the bunker monitor again. Static flickered across the cracked screen before briefly stabilizing. One blurry image appeared. Empty forest. No hunters. Then, suddenly the feed cut out completely. Ethan frowned. "That is not good." Lysara's eyes opened immediately. What happened? Either the storm fried the camera system, he reached for another power cell beside the wall, or somebody cut the feed manually. The bunker fell silent again. Then came the sound. Soft at first. Metal tapping lightly against the outer hatch. 3 slow knocks. Ethan's entire posture tightened instantly. Lysara stood despite obvious pain, her glowing eyes narrowing toward the ceiling. Another 3 knocks echoed through the bunker. Calm. Patient. Not the behavior of hunters searching blindly. Ethan moved toward the hatch access panel beside the wall and quietly activated the exterior microphone. Static crackled for a second before a smooth, distorted voice filled the bunker. "Princess Lysara." Ethan recognized the tone immediately. Not a soldier. Someone important. "Your absence has already destabilized Dominion negotiations," the voice continued. "Return willingly, and the human will remain unharmed." Lysara's expression hardened into something cold enough to freeze the room. "He lies," she whispered. Ethan muted the speaker briefly. "Friend of yours?" "Council Executor Vaylor." Even exhausted, disgust sharpened every word she spoke. "My mother's advisor." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "The guy hunting you through the woods works in politics?" "In the Dominion, those are often the same thing." Before Ethan could answer, the speaker crackled again. "The imprint has already progressed beyond containment protocols." Vaylor's calm voice echoed through the bunker. "You know what happens if synchronization completes?" Lysara went pale beneath the silver glow of her skin. Ethan noticed immediately. "What happens?" She said nothing. The silence answered loudly enough. Vaylor continued speaking through the storm. "The bond is altering your neural aggression centers already. Your instincts are weakening. Your judgment is compromised." Ethan frowned slightly. "That sounds dramatic." Lysara looked at him with visible fear now. Real fear. He is not wrong. Ethan stared at her. "Explain." For several seconds, she struggled to say the words. "The Silthery evolved during planetary extinction wars," she said quietly. "Aggression responses became central to our survival. Dominance. Territorial instincts. Emotional suppression." Another soft knock echoed above them. "The imprint bond was originally designed to stabilize those instincts between bonded pairs." Ethan slowly pieced it together. "You mean calm them down?" Lysara nodded once. "A fully synchronized bond reduces violent neural responses permanently." Ethan blinked. "That sounds like a good thing." "Not to the Dominion." Her glowing eyes drifted toward the hatch overhead. "A peaceful air cannot rule Silthery society." Silence settled heavily inside the bunker. Ethan finally understood why they were hunting her so desperately. This was never about marriage, or tradition, or politics alone. The bond threatened the foundation of their entire civilization. Vaylor's voice returned once more through the speaker. Softer this time. "Princess, if synchronization completes with the human, You will no longer be recognized as a true daughter of the Dominion. Ethan glanced toward Lysara beside him. Her expression did not change, but the pain in her eyes did. And somehow, that hurt worse than anything else. The bunker felt smaller after that. Smaller and heavier somehow, like the mountain itself had shifted above them. Ethan remained near the speaker panel with one hand resting against the cold metal wall, while rainwater dripped steadily from the ceiling pipes nearby. Across from him, Lysara stood beneath the dim emergency light wrapped in the thermal blanket, her silver markings glowing softly beneath blue skin that looked almost translucent now from exhaustion. Outside, Valor waited in complete confidence. That bothered Ethan more than the threats. Men who expected obedience were usually the dangerous kind. The speaker crackled again. "Princess Lysara," Valor said calmly. "Your biological synchronization levels have already exceeded 40%. Ethan frowned immediately. "He can track the bond remotely?" Lysara nodded once without looking at him. "The collar transmits neural data continuously." Ethan glanced toward the restraint around her throat. With visible disgust. "That thing belongs in a nightmare. It belongs to the Dominion." Valor continued speaking through the bunker walls like he could hear them breathing. "The human does not understand what the bond will cost you." Ethan reached toward the mute switch again, but Lysara stopped him softly. "No." Her glowing eyes remained fixed on the speaker above them. "Let him speak." Something had changed in her voice. Less fear now. More sadness. Valor's tone remained perfectly measured. "Your mother built peace through strength, princess. The council will never follow an heir whose instincts have been softened by alien influence." Ethan folded his arms. "You keep saying peaceful like it is a disease." For the first time, Valor acknowledged him directly. "Human male?" The title sounded colder than an insult. "Your species mistakes emotional restraint for moral superiority." Ethan shrugged lightly. "Usually because it keeps us from becoming monsters." Silence answered him for several seconds. Then Valor spoke again, quieter this time. "The Silthri survived extinction because we abandoned weakness." Lysara closed her eyes briefly at those words. Ethan noticed immediately. "You do not believe that anymore, do you?" he asked softly. Her eyes opened slowly. Tired golden light reflected through the darkness between them. "I used to." Outside, thunder rolled low across the mountains. The storm was finally breaking apart beyond the forest canopy, revealing faint silver dawnlight through the bunker windows. Ethan could see the outlines of trees again now. Endless black pines dripping with rain beneath the cliffs. The world looked calmer than it had all night. Inside the bunker, nothing felt calm anymore. Lysara slowly stepped closer toward him until only a few feet separated them. "When I was young," she said quietly, "the Dominion taught me that fear creates obedience, that compassion creates vulnerability." Ethan listened without interrupting. Every lesson, every ceremony, every political alliance. Her glowing markings pulsed softly beneath the blanket. "We were taught to rule through emotional distance." Ethan studied her face carefully. And then, Lysara looked directly into his eyes. "Then a human stranger risked his life for someone he did not know." The words landed harder than Ethan expected. Before he could answer, pain suddenly crossed Lysara's face again. She staggered slightly against the wall as the collar around her throat flashed bright blue. Ethan caught her arm instantly before she fell. The second their skin touched, another emotional surge rushed through him. Not fear this time. Warmth. Safety. Relief so overwhelming it almost hurt. Ethan inhaled sharply while Lysara gripped his jacket hard enough to wrinkle the fabric beneath her trembling hands. Her glowing patterns flared silver across the bunker darkness like reflected starlight. Valor's voice returned immediately through the speaker above them. Urgent for the first time all night. Synchronization spike detected. Lysara's breathing grew uneven as she looked up at Ethan with visible panic. "The bond is accelerating." Ethan tightened his hold on her arm carefully. "Then tell me how to stop it." Lysara stared at him silently for several seconds. Then, almost painfully, she whispered, "I do not think I want it anymore." Dawn finally broke over Velker, 9 in pale silver light. Rainwater slid down the bunker windows while distant clouds drifted slowly between the mountain ridges beyond the forest. The storm was ending. But inside the bunker, nothing felt settled. Ethan still held Lysara steady beside the wall, while the silver patterns beneath her skin glowed brighter than ever, soft light pulsing across the darkness like a living heartbeat. Her breathing remained uneven, not from fear anymore, from acceptance. Above them, the speaker crackled once more. Valor's voice had lost its calm edge entirely. "Princess Lysara," he said sharply, "synchronization has exceeded critical thresholds. Step away from the human immediately." Lysara did not even look toward the speaker. Her eyes stayed fixed on Ethan instead. Tired golden eyes carrying years of loneliness he could suddenly understand far too clearly. Through the bond, fragments still lingered inside him. Endless ceremonies beneath cold palace lights. Advisors speaking about strength, while treating compassion like contamination. A childhood spent learning how not to feel. Ethan realized something then. Lysara had not escaped the Dominion because she feared becoming weak. She escaped because she was exhausted from pretending strength meant emptiness. Valor's voice echoed harder through the bunker. "If synchronization completes, the Council will strip you of succession rights permanently." Ethan finally looked toward the speaker panel. "Then maybe the Council should find better priorities. You speak about matters beyond your comprehension, human." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, I think I finally understand exactly what this is." Silence answered him for a moment. Then Valor spoke again. "You believe she chose this bond freely?" Ethan glanced back at Lysara beside him. She looked pale beneath the silver glow now, but her expression remained steady. "Did you?" he asked quietly. For a second, Lysara looked almost surprised by the question itself, like nobody had ever asked what she wanted before. Then she answered softly, "No one has ever given me a choice until now." The bunker fell silent again except for the soft hum of the collar around her throat. Ethan looked down at the device once more. Blue lights continued flashing across its surface while Dominion tracking signals pulsed beneath the metal shell. Control. Monitoring. Ownership disguised as tradition. Ethan reached toward the back connector carefully. Lysara's eyes widened immediately. "Ethan, you said this thing monitors the bond." He kept his voice calm while examining the damaged wiring near the clasp. "Then maybe it is time somebody stops listening." Valor's voice sharpened instantly through the speaker. "Human, do not touch the restraint." Ethan ignored him completely. The locking mechanism had already weakened from storm exposure and earlier damage. One loose connector sparked faintly beneath his fingers. Lysara stared at him in disbelief. "If you remove it," she whispered, "the Dominion will never stop hunting us." Ethan looked up at her with the smallest tired smile. Pretty sure they already crossed that line. Then he pulled the connector free. The collar shut. Down instantly. Every blue light vanished. Silence crashed through the bunker all at once. No tracking pulses. No speaker. No Dominion voice. Just the sound of rainwater dripping quietly outside while dawn light filled the room. Lysara swayed slightly as though a weight she carried her entire life had suddenly disappeared. Ethan steadied her instinctively before she could fall. The second their hands touched again, the emotional surge felt different this time. Not fear. Not confusion. Peace. Real peace. Lysara stared at him silently, while silver light reflected softly across her eyes. "Why?" she whispered. Ethan thought about the question longer than expected. Finally, he answered honestly. "Because nobody should have to earn the right to feel human." Lysara's expression broke then. Not dramatically. Not loudly, just quietly enough to matter. Outside the bunker, the first rays of sunlight slipped through the alien forest, turning the wet trees silver beneath the morning sky. And for the first time since Ethan found her bleeding in the storm, Lysara stopped looking like someone being hunted. She looked free.